You go.
Okay, thank you so much. So hello, everyone. My name's Sean LeBlanc, and I'm a wedding and portrait photographer based in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, where I live with my beautiful wife and my two young, very energetic boys. And so I live on an acreage. I live on 2 acres, and I built a studio, a custom studio that you see here. I'm actually in it right now, so you can see that behind me. But I also have, of course, all this beautiful Graphi Proline wall art here. And this is a studio that I work out of now. And I primarily photograph luxury weddings and also fine art portraiture. But I'm here today to talk to you about the elements of creating bold and dramatic photography. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to translate those elements into creating beautiful artwork collection design. So starting with clean background. So this is the first thing that I always look for when I go to a new location with my clients. Is I always think about where can I put them on a clean background. So what do I mean by that? So here you can see my clients are walking along this ridge line, and it's just as simple as them holding hands. But you can see they're on sky and they're free of distractions. So there's nothing in behind them. And then that way they really stand out in the frame. Here as well, so now I'm using more of a telephoto lens, so an 85mm lens shooting across a valley. And again, having my clients just simply walk down the mountainside here, holding hands again. And you can see I have them on sky, and so that way they really stand out in the frame. Here as well, this is from a wedding in Jamaica. So I'm actually in the water, holding my camera just at water level, tilting it up a little bit. And again, having my clients walk across the ridge line there. So they're on sky. So again, with that clean background. And so they're really standing out in the frame. But it doesn't, your clients don't always have to be on sky. So here I've just found a higher vantage point and I'm shooting downward, and I'm actually using the lake in behind my clients as that clean background. And so I'm just going to go into a bit more detail as to what I mean here. So this is, so I was out in the mountains photographing this wonderful couple, and you can see the mountains are in behind them. And all it took was for me to get a little bit lower. So just crouch down. And again, I was able to get them on sky onto that clean background. And so they're really able to stand out in the frame that way. So after I've thought about where can I put them on a clean background, I start to think about how can I creatively frame my clients. So in this case, I was shooting downtown Calgary, and I noticed this area here. So there's that clean background again, but there were also these interesting elements, these interesting architectural elements from the bridge they were standing on. So I used the iron rods that you see here as that frame. So again, on that clean background. Here, this was from a beautiful wedding I had the privilege of photographing in Spain at this incredible castle. And as we were walking through this alleyway, again, I noticed a nice clean background. There was this iron gateway that you see that's creating this frame around my clients. And so I took a step back, got out my 35mm lens, and was able to bring in some of the beautiful architecture around them. And again, you can see that having them on that clean background and being careful not to have the iron gateway touch them at all here, I was able to create them free of distraction and create a compelling portrait that way. So here as well, again, using an overhanging tree that was nearby. Again, simply just having my clients walk along that ridgeline, holding hands, the groom looking back towards his beautiful bride, walking through, and then just using some of the natural vegetation, again, from that overhanging tree, so that I was able to create this frame around them and help fill the frame. This is actually a page from Mauricio's handbook here. He's someone that's really inspired me to get very creative with my photography. And so I photographed a wedding at the zoo here in Calgary, and there were these huge leaves that you see here. And as I was walking by, I noticed this small little hole, and I thought, boy, it'd be kind of neat to get down low, get my camera right up against that leaf, and fill the frame with the back of the leaf and use that little opening as a way to frame my clients. And so at the time, I also had a video light. And so I just shone the video light on that leaf to bring in some of the detail that you see around them here. And I also had an off-camera flash set behind my clients. So that's why you're seeing this brim light here. And then it was all about just capturing a beautiful moment between them. And I also used a wider lens, so you can see a 24 millimeter lens here, just to bring in more of the leaf elements there and really help fill the frame. So once I've thought about clean backgrounds, creative framing, I then start to think about how can I draw the viewer's eye towards my clients in the photo. And so for that, I use leading lines. So this is a good example of that. And this is actually a structure that I used to walk by every day on my way to work as an engineer. And every time I saw it, I always thought, boy, that would be a really neat portrait location, just because it's quite unique. As you can see, there's lots of leading lines here. This is actually a dinosaur vertebrae. So in Alberta, where we have lots of oil and gas, and so that's kind of where that comes from. And so eventually I had the opportunity to take some clients out there on their wedding day and capture this portrait here. So again, you see that clean background, and then using the elements of the vertebrae or the structure as a way to draw the eye from left to right toward my clients. And the other thing about this is I'm starting to use opposing primary colors. So that's that cool background that you see mixed with the warm foreground. So you're going to see a lot of that in my photography here. Here, using a bit of a wider lens, so 24 mil, but now I'm using this spiral staircase. So these iron rods that you see here as a way to draw the eye from the top of the frame down towards my clients here that are framed within. This was taken moments after they were married at this beautiful venue. This is a fireplace that had candles lined along the top of the fireplace. And I thought, boy, that would be really neat. Instead of using, lines that I saw, maybe perhaps I could use these candles as a way to draw the eye. And so with this, I had my 35 mil lens, again, placed on a clean background. And now I'm using I'm using off-camera flash as a way to draw the eye to the brightest part in the portrait here, and then using the candles as a way to draw the eye towards my clients. So now I've thought about clean backgrounds, creative framing, leading lines. Now there's another element I can add in, and those are triangles. So our eyes are attracted to triangles and angles. And so for this portrait here, this was taken out in Kicking Horse, which is about 2 hours from my studio. And if you can see, I'm using quite a long lens, so 70 to 200, and I'm actually on another mountain. And just a quick story in behind this photograph, it was so windy on this day that they actually had to shut down the gondolas because they were blowing completely to the side. And so it was just myself and my wedding clients up on top of this mountain, and we had some time to play around, and of course we had to wait for the wind to die down so all the guests could come up to the top of the mountain. And so while we were up there, I kind of saw this area, and again, you can start to see how the triangles form within this area. So in the foreground, you've got this a triangle here with the mountain, here as well in the background. The sky starts to make a triangle, and then you also can see one in my client's veil as well. And so there's 4 triangles here. The other thing you'll notice are those opposing primary colors, which I talked about before. So that warm foreground mixed with that cool background. This photograph here, you can probably already see the triangles that are forming. So within the horse's legs here. So as the horse was walking by, I used the horse as a frame for my clients underneath, and I just had them do a simple dance move in the background here, as simple as the groom twirling the bride there. Here as well, so as simple as a bridal party walking across the dock. And what's interesting about this photograph is all of their feet are completely apart, right? So you see the bride here, her feet are apart. And then as you move back, all the feet are almost doing something just a little bit different. And so when you have that variety, it starts to create more of a compelling portrait. And you know, as I've been talking about triangles, you can see those form here with their feet. So silhouettes. So I love to take silhouettes, and they're really easy to do. All you need is a bright backdrop or a bright background, and then underexpose your frame. So here, this was actually taken in a very busy parking lot. So there were some picnic tables around, and I just had my clients stand on top of those on one picnic table and use a bit of a longer lens just to cut out all the distraction around them. There's that clean backdrop that I've been talking about, clean background. And then again, underexposing. So I'm using a smaller aperture to bring the exposure of the frame down a little bit more and create this silhouette. Here as well, so I'm using a longer lens, so a 200 f2, a beautiful lens shot at f5.6. And you can see that bright background in behind them. So again, by underexposing the scene, the frame, I'm able to get this beautiful silhouette. Here I'm just using that bright background as with a bright cloud that was in the sky. And again, silhouettes are all about shapes. So with all of these portraits that you're seeing, I typically have my clients face one another. So that way I'm able to get the shape of their faces in them. And that's quite evident with this photograph. So here, of course, with the full bridal party together, this was taken at a local venue here in Calgary. And as we were walking in, there were all of these sort of intricate designs in behind. And this was from a bright and sunny day. And so really the light was just hitting the roof and casting these really neat shadows onto this concrete wall in behind. And so I had the bridal party line up. And again, keeping in mind that silhouettes are all about shapes. So I had them turn and face one another. So that way I could get the profile of their faces. And then it took a little bit of maneuvering because I wanted to be careful that the shadows weren't going through their faces. Okay, so I had to move a little bit, and you can see that I was able to keep the profile of all of their faces here. And then it took a little bit more tweaking in that I asked the bridesmaids to just bring their arms away from their side, so that way we could create that shape from their arm, as well as holding the bouquet. And then even taking it a step further, so asking the groomsmen just to separate their feet a little bit more, so that way we could get some of those triangles. And of course, you can see all kinds of triangles within this portrait here. So this is I really loved how everything came together. Again, it all started with seeing that silhouette opportunity where you had that bright, or where we had that bright background, and then just a little bit of maneuvering to get everything to fall into place. And so the other thing you may start to notice is that I'm starting to layer a lot of these techniques. And so when you do that, you really start to create a bold and dramatic photograph. So if you look at this portrait here, this was at the Calgary Library here. And so we've got that clean background that I've been talking about, creative framing with the window, leading lines. So I got nice and low, so that way I could bring in some of this this line here that I've been talking about, as well as those opposing primary colors, so that warm mixed with the cool background here. And then you'll also notice that there's a bright background. Okay, so that way I immediately thought to go to silhouette for the couple here. So when I am looking to get the creative juices going and I arrive on a location, you know, often on a wedding day, the bridal party's getting anxious. You don't have a lot of time. The light is horrible. And you're really put to the test at that point. And a way to get the creative juices going, I always think, where can I get low? Where can I get high? Where can I go far? And where can I get close? And so when I start to do that, again, the creative juices start to flow, and I start to be able to create some beautiful portraits. So what do I mean by that? So getting low, so this is literally just lying right down on the ground. So here with my 35mm lens, tilting the camera up so that I'm able to use this culvert as a way to frame my couple. I've talked a lot about that. You can see they're on a nice clean background here. And I just had the woman here, my client, just turn her face towards the natural light. So that way we could get some beautiful light onto her face. And then just had her fiance just dip his chin down so that we were able to capture a beautiful moment here. And that all started with just getting low and lying right on the ground. Here, this was taken out in Moraine Lake in the Rocky Mountains. So I'm using my longer lens, 70 to 200, but I'm shooting from a low vantage point. So I'm not lying down on the ground, but I've found a lower vantage point to get low and shoot up. Again, here's that clean background that I've been talking about. But you can also see there's quite a few triangles just from the mountains in the background here. Get high, so finding a place where you can capture a portrait from a very high vantage point. So in this case, I'm using a wider lens at 24mm, tilting it down and capturing some of these beautiful trees here. And it was as simple as asking my clients just to go for a little walk along this pathway here, holding hands. Here you can see I've found this ledge just to hop on, stood up on it. I really like to take the veil and pull that over my clients. I'll do that quite often. That way I'm able to get more texture to the photograph. I'm able to get some of those lines and those triangles that I've been talking about. And so this is what I was able to capture here. So that's a matter of, again, finding that high vantage point where I can shoot down and just having them create a beautiful moment. So I took it a step further and I just asked the bride to lift her left hand up just onto her shoulder. So that way I could show her beautiful wedding ring here and just turn her chin towards her husband and just ask the husband to give a simple kiss on her cheek. And so I was able to create this portrait, again, just by finding this high vantage point here. Get far. So here, I originally took this photograph without using this natural vegetation here. So I was quite a bit closer to the couple. And of course, this was taken at dusk. So I got some beautiful ambient light here to work with. But I just found that the sky was just too wide open. And so I wanted to create a way that I could help fill the frame. And so that was as simple as taking just a few steps back and using this overhead vegetation here as a way to help fill the frame. I was still able to capture those beautiful colors of the dusk light there. But by getting further away from my couple, I was able to capture this beautiful portrait. And you see, again, it was just as simple as asking the groom to slowly lead his bride down the hillside here. It's something that I often ask my couples to do. It's something really easy. And as they're slowly walking down, I'll just kind of be shooting through that whole moment. And I used a bit of a smaller aperture here as well, so at f11. And that was to keep this vegetation, this overhead vegetation here, more in focus as opposed to having it blurred out. So again, that way I just felt that it helped fill the frame a bit more that way. So this photograph here, this was actually quite a challenge to set up. And so the bride was getting ready on the top floor of Hotel Arts. It's a popular hotel here in Calgary. And as I was walking up, I saw this clean background and I thought, boy, that would be a really neat portrait to have the bride and groom carefully walk down the road, use these buildings on either side of them as a way to frame them, and then just bring in Calgary. You know, they got married downtown Calgary. What a beautiful way to tell their wedding story by including some of those city elements. And so I had my assistant down here at the road level. Of course, there were cars driving back and forth, so we had to wait for a lull in the traffic. And when I was ready, I just telephoned down to my assistant. She set everything up and had my clients just walk down the road slowly. You see that pose again with the groom leading the bride and just having his head turned back. You can also see, you know, a small little triangle here between his feet that's formed. And I just waited for the perfect moment that they were framed right in the middle between these two buildings. And of course, use the wider lens here. So that way I could bring in, again, some of the city elements there. And just one other thing to note here, I had a smaller aperture, so at f8, and that was just to keep a lot of these buildings in focus. Here, this was taken, I think, a couple years ago now, from the top of the Rimrock Hotel. It's a very famous hotel out in the Rocky Mountains. And my wonderful clients here, they were from LA and came all the way to Banff to get married in the beauty of the Rocky Mountains. But unfortunately, that summer we had some horrific smoke from forest fires that were happening in BC that kind of rolled through the valley. And so it was very difficult to see the mountains. So I wanted to do something that, you know, we could still capture the beauty of Banff, because it is quite iconic. You can see the Banff Springs here in the background. And so so when I was on top of the Rimrock Hotel, again, looking for those clean backgrounds, I saw this trail that came from the middle of the frame all the way down. And I thought, wow, that would be really neat if we could capture, you know, the beautiful Rocky Mountains, the Banff Springs Hotel, as well as my clients in a frame that way. And so this is probably the furthest I've ever been away from my clients that have been in a frame like this. And so again, my assistant went down to ground level here with the cell phone. I was probably, you know, a good 400, 500 feet away. And we actually used off-camera flash from that distance. So I was using pocket wizards, and I was amazed that the flash was actually able to fire from that distance. So here you can see my assistant holding my flash on full power. So that way we were able to get just a little bit of light onto them. You can see that here. And of course, bring in the beautiful landscape as well as light them in the frame. So get close. So, you know, we've talked about getting low, getting high, getting far. So now getting close. 35 mil lens is great for that. So here, you know, again, I've talked about taking the veil and just bringing that over my clients. So I'm doing the same thing here. So that way we can get some more texture, some more of those triangles, some more of those angles. And with my 35 mil, I'm able to get quite close. And what I really like about this photograph is that it's the almost kiss. So I find when couples almost kiss, it just creates more of a compelling moment within the portrait. And so often I'll just ask them to, you know, go in for a kiss, and I'll kind of shoot through that whole moment. And this was one where, you know, I was able to get, again, that almost kiss. And I just had the bride raise up her hand a little bit, so that way we could bring in her beautiful wedding ring there. Here I'm using a macro lens, so 105 macro, and same thing. So similar to the other portrait that I just shared with you, bringing up her hand so that we can see, that way we can see her beautiful wedding ring. And in this case, the light was a lot lower, so I was able to use the sunlight in behind them as a way to create a bit of a brim light just around her face here, to help separate her from the dark background that she was on. And the other thing I like about this portrait is that even though her hand is covering his mouth, you can see that he's smiling with his eyes. And so, you know, with portraiture, of course, it's always about the eyes, right? Because they're really a window to our soul. So, I mean, just seeing his eyes and seeing that they're kind of squinted a little bit, you can see that he's smiling and he's really happy in that moment. Off-camera flash. So, I've talked a lot about different elements and primarily using natural light, but I also love to use off-camera flash as a way to help draw the viewer's eye and create more of a bold and dramatic portrait. And so a lot of the students that I work with, they do have a lot of questions about how to properly use off-camera flash, and I've tried to come up with a way to think about it as simple as possible. And so these are just some simple steps that I follow every time that I'm shooting with off-camera flash. So the first thing is to shoot manual. So all of the portraits that I take, whether it's in my studio or out on a wedding day, I'm always shooting manual. So that way I have more control of aperture, ISO, shutter speed, everything that needs to come together for a portrait. So that's the first thing. The second thing is I always think about composition. So, once I have my settings dialed in, then I'll think about how can I compose. Again, using those elements that I talked about clean background, creative framing, leading lines, all of those things. From there, I'll expose for the ambient light. Again, shooting in manual. So if it's a bright and sunny day, I'll be at ISO 100. Whereas if I'm in a dark room during a wedding reception, I'll turn that up to 3200. I always make sure my shutter speed is less than 1/250th of a second. So that way I'm below the sync speed of my Nikon camera, and I'm able to use the full power of my flash. And then I also think about aperture, and that's really for creative effect. So do I want to use a wider aperture to create some depth of field? Or do I want to use a smaller aperture to bring in some more of the detail? And from there, I'll underexpose that ambient exposure by 1 or 2 stops, and then I'll adjust the flash output. So I'm going to show you an example of what that looks like here. So this is a portrait that I took at a popular venue here in Calgary with my 24mm lens. So just to bring in some of the unique elements of the room here. So of course, you can see triangles, lines. We've talked a lot about that already. But also just in terms of the composition, there is this chandelier that's hanging down from the roof in 1/3 of the frame. And then I also have my client sitting on the stairs in the other 1/3 of the frame. And so you can see they're at opposite parts in the image here, just to create more of a compelling composition. So in terms of using off-camera flash, I first of all exposed for that chandelier, brought in my off-camera flash, and then in post-production, I was able to add more of the elements that you see here. So that cool mixed with warm that I've been talking about, those opposing primary colors, and just able to help bring out some of the detail of her dress here, being careful not to have those highlights in her bright white dress blowing out, as well as and really capture a beautiful moment between them. This is another example. So this is out in Kicking Horse, which is a venue I talked about already. And so I saw this clean background, had my client stand on a rock to capture the beautiful mountain backdrop here. Had my assistant, you may notice this guy, he's pretty popular in the photography industry. So I had him hold my flash. I was using a snoot here just to help focus the light onto my clients, and then cropped everything in. Okay, so here you can see again, clean background. I'm using off-camera flash as a way to light my clients here to help draw the eye towards them in this portrait, and as well as underexposing the scene so that it's a bit of a darker background, and so that my clients really stand out in the frame. So in this case, this was taken out in beautiful Canmore, which is about 45 minutes from where I live. And here I'm using a 200 f2, so a big lens. So it's about that big. But I thought it would create some really an interesting element to this photograph, create some compression with using that longer lens. I shot it right at f2. so that it's almost like a 3D effect. And I was actually able to light them. So here's my assistant. She's holding a off-camera flash pretty much on full power. And given there was lots of ambient light, I had to use full power so that way I could brighten them up here. And just to give you an idea of how far away I was with that 200 f2, you can see where I was just, in terms of across the valley. Again, using that same posing technique of the groom leading the bride slowly down the mountainside here and just kind of shooting through that moment. Here, this is out in Peyto Lake, not far from Lake Louise, very iconic spot. And here I used off-camera flash. So if you look at the composition, we have the lake coming in from the left to right, so creating a leading line. And I had my clients on that clean background again, but you'll notice it's quite a dark background. And so to create that separation, I had the groom hold a flash just beside him here, so out of the frame so you couldn't see it. I had him point the flash at the umbrella, so when the light hit the umbrella, it bounced back down and actually created some beautiful soft light on their face. But the other thing it did is it created this brim light that you see around their heads and their faces. And that was really to create separation from this dark background that I was speaking about before. Here, same thing. So now you're seeing more of these elements that I've been talking about. Triangles, clean background, using this as a frame. But now I'm bringing an off-camera flash to help complement a lot of those elements. So I had my assistant just in behind this pillar here with a simple speed light and a grid to help focus the light here. I had my clients just turn their faces towards one another to create this beautiful moment that you see here, and had everything come together that way. I also decided to use a bit of a smaller aperture, so f8, and that was just to keep a lot of the detail from this this neat looking roof here, combined with this beautiful terrain. So I talked about silhouettes already with natural light. So when I see a bright area in behind my clients, I always think silhouette. But you can also create the same thing with an off-camera flash. So this is from a wedding I shot in Costa Rica. And when we were there, the sun went down quite early and the wedding was running behind, and as weddings do. And so I had to create something with no available light. And so I was able to do that simply by asking my assistant to stand behind my clients here, point the flash directly at this incredible intricate door behind them. And so in doing that, I created that bright spot. And when the light hit that door, it bounced forward and lit up the sidewalls on either side of my clients. So here you can see those leading lines that I've been talking about. The background is a little bit busy. I maybe should have taken this out in post-production here, but it was such a beautiful door that I just decided to leave all those elements in there. Here, this was a portrait taken in our beautiful new library in downtown Calgary. It's got some incredible elements to this this library. So I wanted to capture, these lines and these angles and triangles that you see here. And so I thought a great way to do that would be to create an off-camera flash silhouette. So here, of course, I'm at a lower vantage point, and you can see my assistant there just in the distance, holding an off-camera flash, pointing it at the column in behind my clients here to create that bright spot. And so underexposing the scene, which I've talked about already, and again, creating that bright spot. So when you look at this, you can see all of these, incredible detail of the under part of the stairs here, the side of the stairs, of course, all of these triangles and these angles. But when you kind of peruse it and look at it, your eye goes to the bright area, and that's where you see my clients there. Originally, I tried it with my client just lifting her hand up like this, but it created too much distraction. So I just had her lower that. And so that way I was able to get the profile of their faces. So reflections, here, this was from the Art Gallery in Edmonton, which is also an incredible venue, all sorts of reflections. And so as I was walking up the stairs, they had this glass railing, and I looked to my right, and I could see that the stairs were being reflected from the, into the glass railing. And so again, I saw the clean background. I had my assistant over here with my off-camera flash to throw some light to create that bright area to help draw the viewer's eye of the portrait. And with that reflection, you can see all of these lines, which are again, drawing the eye towards them. And the other thing about this is I found with reflections, I mean, you always want to keep your clients sort of in that dark area of the reflection. And then again, I'm using that off-camera flash to help light them. Here as well, so this is in a very busy parking lot. So there's actually cars all over. I wish I had a behind the scenes photo of this, but so what I did is I cut out all of the ambient light. So I used a faster shutter speed to do that. So basically without any off-camera flash or light, this looks like a completely dark scene here. And then from there, I brought in my off-camera flash, again with a grid to help focus the light here. And I actually used my iPhone underneath my 58mm lens to reflect the ceiling onto my iPhone to help fill the frame. Because without this reflection, it was just sort of black, dark area. And was just, it was too much, too much of the photograph was dark. So that's why I brought in that reflective iPhone to help fill the frame. And of course, you can see with leading lines here, your eye is drawn towards my clients. Here as well. So this was taken at a really neat resort here in Alberta. And so I was immediately drawn to these chandeliers that were hanging from the ceiling. And so I exposed for those chandeliers. So brought the overall exposure of the portrait down, brought in my off-camera flash. But as I was taking photos, I noticed that every time the light would hit my clients, their faces were being reflected in the artwork that was hanging on the walls. And so as I moved a little bit more to the left, I was actually able to frame them within one of those art pieces. And so that just took a little bit of tweaks or a little bit of tweaking to be able to do that. So, you know, I've talked a lot about different elements, again, leading lines, clean backdrops, all of those things. And so when you start to layer all of these techniques, that's where you really start to get these bold and dramatic portraits. So here in this portrait, I'm actually shooting through, am I still good for time? Okay.
You have just a couple of minutes, so we're good.
Okay, yeah. So here I'm shooting through 10 rows of wine glasses. So that's where all of these incredible bokeh balls are coming through. And I use a wider aperture at 2.4 to create those bokeh balls. And my assistant was standing in behind my clients here with an off-camera flash to create that bright spot that that I talked about previously. And so again, going to a silhouette for this. Here, there's actually quite a few different things going on here. So bright area. So my thought was immediately to go to silhouette for this woman that was standing out on the terrace. And I had to wait a while for her to turn her head. So if you remember, silhouettes are all about shapes, and she was looking forward for the longest time, but eventually she turned her head and I was able to capture this silhouette here. And that was all the while my assistant was inside with my off-camera flash pointed towards the bride and the makeup artist. And so I tried to time everything so that this woman's head was turned to the left, capture that silhouette, and at the same time capture the makeup brush about to go onto the bride here as well. And so of course you see opposing primary colors here, that cool mixed with warm, off-camera flash, which I've talked about before as well, silhouettes. And so as you can see, there's quite a few different layers within this photograph.
And the Piazza San Marco of Venice too.
Yeah, that's right.
That's right.
So here as well, this was at the public library in Calgary. Again, it's a fantastic area, or a fantastic venue to shoot in. Here I'm using 2 off-camera flashes. So I have one on the ground pointed towards the wall, so to create a bit of a leading line there. And I've used a blue gel on that flash to create this blue effect that you see. My other flash is lying down on the ground, pointed at the wall and behind. So again, to create that bright spot, to create the silhouette that you see here. But I'm using a warm gel. So again, those opposing primary colors that I've talked about before. My clients are facing one another to create the shapes for that silhouette. And I just asked my client here just to bring her elbow back so I could create more of the triangle and angles that I've been talking about. So, I've talked a lot about different techniques, but it's really the moment. So a beautiful moment that kind of ties everything together. And so some of the different techniques that I use for capturing moments, this is a really simple one. I have my clients just turn towards one another and they're just touching their foreheads, walking up a hill. And as they do that, their foreheads start to bump and they start to laugh. And so as they're doing that, I just shoot through that entire moment. And I'm able to capture this beautiful expression and this beautiful moment in between. The other thing I was careful of is just asking the bride to have her hand on the top of his hand. So that way we could see her beautiful wedding ring and kind of set more context within the portrait here. And it's actually challenging to do this because I was trying to keep the skyline of Calgary in the background sort of all intact and just get a great composition while walking backwards, while having them laugh and capture this moment here.
Sean, I love this. I love how they were looking at each other. I love the emotion. This is the worst part for us is I want to see more. I could keep you here forever.
Okay. Yeah.
and listen to you and your work. And now we're at the point where we're going to wrap it up. Is this your last slide? I can't remember.
Yeah, I just had a couple more, but that's fine. We can end it.
Well,
yeah.
I don't want to because Sean, your studio, I'm still just in awe of looking at the opening slide of your studio.
Yeah.
And that really, that just tugged at my heart when I saw, of course, the graphics, wall art is an added bonus, but it wasn't about that. I was just trying to put myself into the shoes of your clients. When they walk into that stunning space, to me, it looks like a movie premiere experience. So, I mean, your clients have to feel like they are walking on red carpet when they enter your studio. Like it's such an experience that they're not used to getting, number one. And then they are hit with this beautiful wall art. And I just want to congratulate you on how you've created that experience for your clients. And I have in your studio space, I don't know if we can go back to that slide and show everybody the collection in the right wall. I have that same wall art. And I just want to tell you, whenever I have visitors come into my space here, they are just absolutely blown away. So as we're wrapping up, I have one question for you. Everything that you have learned in your corporate career and within our industry, what one piece of advice would you give a photographer watching today that's looking at transitioning to a full-time photographer?
Oh, that's a great question, Maureen. I would say learn how to create printed work and how to communicate the value of printed work to your clients. As an artist and a photographer, I love creating something tangible, something that, you know, is going to stand the test of time, that's going to be on my client's wall for, you know, a very long time. I get a lot of fulfillment out of that. And so, and also it definitely helps with the business part of my studio. So, you know, of course, with creating wall art, it's just an extra revenue stream for your studio. So it's an incredible way to not only be fulfilled as an artist, but to help create more revenue for your studio.
Well said. Well, Sean, thank you for your time today. Thank you again for showing us a little bit more, the glimpse in your business and learning more about your work. I appreciate everything that you're doing. And now we're going to transition to the next segment at the Graphistudio Castle. Thank you, Sean.
Okay, you bet. Yeah, you bet. No problem.
You take care.